If you're going to have people on who are responsible for the invasion and destruction of Iraq based on lies, or the incineration of Vietnam, or the destruction of Gaza and the death of tens of thousands of people, and welcome them and treat them like respectable people, tell me what it is that Nick Fuentes has done remotely as bad as that.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I've stumbled across this powerful moment where Glenn Greenwald absolutely destroys the establishment media's hypocrisy about who gets platformed and who doesn't. The panel is debating whether Piers Morgan should have interviewed Nick Fuentes, and Greenwald drops a bomb that leaves everyone speechless. He points out that the same media outlets that welcome war criminals responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths in Iraq and Gaza treat them with respect, but a controversial internet personality is somehow beyond the pale. Andrew Wilson also makes crucial points about the dangers of doxing someone who's already survived assassination attempts, and even the liberal panelists have to admit he's right about that. So make sure you watch until the end, and please comment down below where you're watching from. I really love to see people from all over the world connecting in here. Alright now, let's get into the video.
Thank you very much. Well, joining me on the panel now is Warren Smith, critical thinker and founder of the Secret Scholar Society, Andrew Wilson, host of The Crucible, Mark Lamont Hill, host of Bet News, and influencer Harry Sisson. And also joining us a little later will be Glenn Greenwald. All right, Harry Sisson, we're in the unique position, I believe, where you and I may have a slight agreement here about all this. So what was your view of the Fuentes interview?
Piers, I don't think it's a slight agreement. I think it's a full agreement. First and foremost, I do want to start off by saying I thought the way that you conducted the interview was fantastic. I watched the entire thing, and you, I think, were the only interviewers so far to really hold Nick Fuentes accountable and not let him get away with a lot of his hateful views. I loved how you played the clips side by side and made him defend it on the record. So I want to give props to you there. I thought it was really well done, and I watched the entire thing. And I was trying to decide, similar to you, does Nick Fuentes actually believe these things, or is he doing it for the money? Is it performative? And I might disagree slightly with you. I think it's both. I think he does believe some of these things, and I think some of it's performative. I think when he tried to moderate himself, that's performative. But the more hateful views that, as you mentioned, when the mask kind of slipped, that's what he truly believes. You could tell that he was trying to moderate himself when, as you were talking about with Dr. Phil, talking about the Holocaust. He said, oh, I believe it was the Holocaust, at least 6 million Jews. He said that, but then simultaneously claimed that Hitler is cool and that he liked his uniforms and the music and things like that. So, no, I think Nick Fuentes broadly is a sad, insecure man. I think he's a liar. I think he's a grifter. And I think you exposed that in the interview.
Andrew Wilson, what did you think?
Well, I was just watching your previous segment, and I thought that the framing there was a little off. So I've always appreciated coming on the show and you letting me get my viewpoints out. But I do take some issue with your framing. You did bring up the guy's dad, and you said his name. And when you said it on the air that way, this is a person who has had people attempt to assassinate him. They have come to his house, shown up at his door, and tried to kill him. And that's on video happening. And so when you said the guy's name and then try to tie it into racism, I know that you know this, Piers, but the left broadly will do these harassment campaigns. These harassment campaigns are designed specifically to incite the violence of many of their mentally ill followers.
Andrew, let me just say,
and that's what they do.
Yeah, let me just say, if I had my time again, I wouldn't have said his father's name. But I would have still told the anecdote because I thought it was really important to Nick Fuentes.
The anecdote's not the relevant part.
But the anecdote is relevant. Yeah. The anecdote is relevant when he immediately tried to attack me for ambushing him with a story that he told himself on his show. I mean, look, if I told a story like that...
But that's not what people are upset about.
No, I understand.
They weren't upset about the anecdote. They were upset that you specifically said the guy's name after Fuentes has had these assassination attempts on him.
To be clear... if I had my time again, wouldn't have said his father's name, notwithstanding the fact you can find it in 2 seconds on the internet. Right? So it's not like it's not difficult to find. But I do think it's important that anecdote, to me, was potentially very relevant to why Nick Fuentes is the way he is about racism, for example. Because he was telling a story that cannot be construed, Andrew, any other way than his father was directing them away from restaurants because of his racist views about the people that go in them or run them. And it couldn't be seen any other way.
I get that. I get the point of bringing the anecdote up, but that wasn't what looked to me like what was making these guys so angry. Was not the anecdote itself, but the fact that you said the guy's name, referenced it as his dad, and then this guy's had assassination attempts.
Yeah, but the story was him telling the story.
By the way, hang on. And a lot of the first assassination attempt happened because of the "Your Body, My Choice" thing that he put that tweet out, and people began doxing his address and his family's name, and that's why they showed up to kill him. So the guy's grievance there, I think, is legitimate.
Yeah, but I think it's important that his grievance wasn't just that I named his father, which, again, is a matter of public record. You can find it anywhere, although I wouldn't have said it if I had my time again.
Right off the bat, we need to address what Harry Sisson just said. He claimed Piers was the only interviewer so far to really hold Fuentes accountable. But here's what that framing misses completely. Holding someone accountable means engaging with their actual arguments. It means steel-manning their position and then dismantling it with logic. What Piers did was something different, and Andrew Wilson is about to explain exactly why that matters. Because accountability isn't about gotcha questions. It's not about digging into someone's family background to score emotional points. That's not journalism. That's something else entirely. And Harry calling Fuentes a sad, insecure man, a liar, and a grifter, well, that's just name-calling. That's not engaging with ideas. That's attacking character because you can't or won't engage with the substance. But then Andrew Wilson brought up something that completely reframes this whole conversation, and this is crucial. He pointed out that Piers brought up Fuentes' dad and said his name, and this isn't some abstract concern. This is a person who has had people attempt to assassinate him. They have come to his house, shown up at his door, and tried to kill him. That happened. That's on video. So when you say someone's father's name on a show with millions of viewers, when you connect that name to accusations of racism, what do you think happens next? Andrew called it out directly. The left broadly will do these harassment campaigns. These harassment campaigns are designed specifically to incite the violence of many of their mentally ill followers. And before anyone says that's an exaggeration, let's remember what already happened to Fuentes. After he made controversial statements online, people doxed his address, doxed his family's information, and someone showed up to kill him. That's not hypothetical danger. That's real danger that already materialized. Now, Piers pushed back. He said if he had his time again, he wouldn't have said his father's name, though he noted you can find it in 2 seconds on the internet anyway. But here's the thing. There's a difference between information being technically public and a major television host amplifying it to millions of people. That's not the same thing. Intent and reach matter. And Andrew made another valid point. What made people so angry wasn't just the anecdote itself. It was that Piers specifically said the guy's name, referenced him as his dad, and tried to tie it to racism, all while knowing this person has had assassination attempts on him. The grievance there is legitimate. Because let's talk about that other assassination attempt Andrew mentioned. A lot of it happened because of the "Your Body, My Choice" tweet that Fuentes put out. People began doxing his address and his family's name, and that's why someone showed up to try to kill him. So Fuentes has real, documented reasons to be concerned about his family's safety being compromised on national television.
I don't want to attack his family for the sake of attacking his family. It was when he tried to frame it as an unfair attack on his family, when I think actually the story that he himself put in the public domain was potentially very relevant to why he is the way he is. I as a journalist...
Well, how he was framing it was you're bringing this up and name doxing specifically so that you can rally people into a harassment campaign. That's how he saw it.
No, but that wasn't... Yeah, okay, but just to be clear again, that was not my intention. My intention was to ask him, in all sincerity, if you grow up in an environment at home where there is clear racism that you have discussed yourself on your own show, very, unarguably, you can't listen to the clip, I played it earlier, without realising that's what he's saying, then, is that relevant to the way he is? Let me bring in Mark Lamont Hill here. I mean, Mark, I didn't do that lightly. I had decided before I did the interview that, I would do a lot of research into this. I would find all the clips that I felt were the most incendiary things he'd said on the record, and I would ask him and push him about them in a way that I don't think anyone else has really done, and it would be interesting to see the way he responded. And, if you're going to talk to Nick Fuentes, who openly admits to being a racist, he did it again with me in the show, that anecdote to me was pertinent to why he may have shaped those views. What do you think? Was it unfair?
I think the anecdote was entirely fair and necessary, particularly since, the first part of the interview was very much about his biography. It was very much about what shaped him. He himself volunteered information, even in that interview, about his parents, about how they came together, about the loss of their fathers, etc. All that to me is fair game. I agree that invoking his father's name in that moment was too far. I hear you saying if you could do it again, you wouldn't. Because I do have some ethical and moral reservations about doxing. I don't think it's wrong, for example, if someone does something awful in public and it's relevant to the public interest to track down their job and notify their job. But that's not the same thing as tracking down every private citizen just because we think they're racist or sexist or anti-Semitic or homophobic. I may think you're that thing, but you have a right to be that thing, even though I think it's awful. And I don't think you should live without safety because of that. Now, there's a bigger question, Piers, that you raised at the top of the interview, and it's come up again in the media, and that is, should you even be talking to this guy?
Right.
And I got to be honest with you, Piers, I've struggled with this. I interview controversial people. I sit down with people who people say don't platform them, and I take seriously your point that they already have a platform. And I'm not making them big. I'm not drawing attention to them. They already have the attention. They're just not being questioned or challenged on that platform. I concede that point. I agree with you fully. The problem with this guy, the problem with Nick Fuentes in particular, though, to me, is he's such a chameleon, and he moves in such a way that I'm not sure holding him accountable matters to his base. And he does just enough to look moderate and normal and reasonable that I think he'll do more damage by sneaking some people from the middle and dragging them to his side because they think he's reasonable and only later find out that he's a sexist, misogynist, Hitler-loving Nazi, right? Or whatever he is, right? That's where the danger comes for me. I'm not saying we should interview controversial people. I'm just saying this particular guy, I feel like we're playing into his interests and his angle.
Yeah, well, Glenn Greenwald, welcome back to Uncensored. You've had Fuentes on your show. What's your view about that issue, about platforming him at all?
Oh, I didn't even consider it to be a difficult question at all. I mean, if you're going to have people on who are responsible for the invasion and destruction of Iraq based on lies, or the incineration of Vietnam, or the destruction of Gaza and the death of tens of thousands of people, and welcome them and treat them like respectable people, tell me what it is that Nick Fuentes.
But here's where it gets interesting. Mark Lamont Hill, who's definitely not some right-wing partisan, actually agreed that invoking the father's name in that moment was too far. Even someone on the other side of the political spectrum acknowledged there's an ethical line there about doxing and safety. He said he has moral reservations about doxing, and even if someone does something awful in public, that's not the same as tracking down every private citizen just because we think they're racist or sexist. So even the liberals on the panel had to admit Piers crossed a line. That should tell you something. But Mark also brought up something that gets to the heart of why platforming debates are so fraught. He said he struggled with whether Piers should have had Fuentes on at all, and his concern was that Fuentes is such a chameleon, he moves in such a way that holding him accountable might not even matter to his base. He worried that Fuentes does just enough to look moderate and normal that he'll actually drag more people from the middle to his side. Now, I actually think that concern reveals something important. The establishment is terrified that when people actually hear alternative perspectives, when they hear someone articulate the frustrations that millions of young men feel, those people might find it compelling. The fear isn't that Fuentes will say something so extreme he'll discredit himself. The fear is that he'll say things that resonate, that make sense to people who feel abandoned by mainstream institutions. But then, the real argument started, and Glenn Greenwald was about to drop an absolute bomb that exposes the hypocrisy of this entire conversation.
Remotely as bad as that justifies allowing them to come on and speak, but not him. And whether you like it or not, he does speak for a huge number of people in his generation and even other generations as well, who feel the same kind of anger and frustration with the status quo, with the establishment, with the kind of dogma that we've been told we have to accept. And there's a lot of people who are angry about it and who rebel against it. And we saw this with Donald Trump on maybe a little bit of a smaller scale, but very much the same pattern. When Donald Trump appeared, everybody was like, oh, he's racist and fascist and he's the misogynist and he's this and that. And no one wanted to grapple with the reason why his message was resonating so much. And to me, it is very similar to Nick Fuentes. Say what you want about him. He's extremely smart, an incredibly talented communicator, and very well read. Like, he's very informed. He's not just some sensationalist babbling on the internet. And I think the reason he has attracted a lot of attention is because he's speaking to the anger and frustration, a lot of which is valid, of a lot of people and to stick your head in the sand and say, oh, we're going to pretend that this isn't happening because his views are too off, but the people who start wars or are responsible for the 2008 financial crisis, these are respectable people who we treat with respect, like Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton or whoever. That to me is the kind of thing that I think is really distorted.
Yeah, Warren Smith. I'll respond to that. Well, no, let me bring in Warren Smith first, and then I'll come back to you, Mark. Warren, that really is my feeling about it. Is that you can let these guys like Fuentes and Andrew Tate run riot, and they do already, and they have massive followings, millions and millions of young men. I know, when I interview Tate, the number of young men who just come up to me in the street to ask about it is off the charts, more than almost any other guest I ever have. So we can either pretend this phenomenon isn't happening, and Fuentes is a phenomenon, whether people like it or not. And I don't hate everything about him. There were elements of that interview where it was a genuinely quite interesting conversation. But there were elements which, either because he wanted to be performative and shocking and attention-seeking, whatever it may be, or because he really believes it, where I felt we saw a pretty dark underbelly of some of his beliefs. Just when somebody just says, I am a racist, and then explains, let me play the clip first, then come to you. You're fine with saying you're a racist?
Totally. I think everybody's racist. I think everybody, if we're being honest, is racist. I think everybody, the only people that aren't racist or pretend not to be are white people to their detriment. Everybody else is racist.
But earlier in the interview, you got aggrieved at the idea that your father was a racist. You wanted to make emphatically sure.
My father's...
He's not.
Because my father doesn't share my same views on that.
So he's the exception to the everyone's a racist.
Well, everybody's a little bit racist.
I thought it was an interesting contradiction there, which he was probably calculating in real time, that having got so exercised about the idea that his father was racist, he then said everyone's racist and there's nothing wrong with it, effectively. But
Glenn Greenwald just delivered one of the most devastating arguments I've heard on this topic. He said, if you're going to have people on who are responsible for the invasion and destruction of Iraq based on lies, or the incineration of Vietnam, or the destruction of Gaza and the deaths of tens of thousands of people, and you welcome them and treat them like respectable people, tell me what it is that Fuentes has done remotely as bad as that. Let that sink in. The people who lied us into wars that killed hundreds of thousands of people get treated with respect on mainstream media. They get book deals. They get consulting contracts. They get presented as serious foreign policy experts. But a provocative internet personality who hasn't actually harmed anyone physically is somehow beyond the pale? That's not a consistent moral standard. That's just gatekeeping about who gets to be part of acceptable discourse. And then Greenwald made the comparison to the reaction to a certain former president. When that person appeared, everybody was saying he's racist and fascist and misogynist. And no one wanted to grapple with the reason why his message was resonating so much. They just wanted to call him names and dismiss his supporters. And look how that worked out. The same pattern is happening with Fuentes. People don't want to ask why he has appeal. They just want to say he's terrible, and anyone who listens to him is terrible. But Greenwald pointed out something crucial. Say what you want about Fuentes, he's extremely smart, an incredibly talented communicator, and very well read. He's very informed. He's not just some sensationalist babbling on the internet, and the reason he has attracted a lot of attention is because he's speaking to the anger and frustration, a lot of which is valid, of a lot of people. Young men who feel like society has declared war on masculinity. Young men who feel like they're blamed for everything. Young men who look at the institutions that are supposed to serve them and see nothing but contempt. Now, you don't have to agree with every solution Fuentes proposes. You don't have to endorse everything he says. But if you can't even acknowledge that he's speaking to real grievances, real frustrations, real problems that mainstream society refuses to address, then you're never going to understand why he has influence. And Greenwald's point about treating establishment figures with respect while demonizing outsiders is so important. The people responsible for the 2008 financial crisis get treated respectfully. People in government who supported disastrous foreign policy get platforms. But someone who questions the consensus, someone who articulates forbidden thoughts, they're treated as uniquely dangerous. That double standard is exactly what drives people to figures like Fuentes in the first place, because it proves that the system isn't actually concerned with preventing harm. It's concerned with controlling acceptable discourse. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.